Hello, this is Marla Dalton, Executive Director and CEO of the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases, or NFID. Welcome to this episode of the Schaffner Report on COVID-19 vaccine updates. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, have recently taken steps to simplify COVID-19 vaccination recommendations. Bivalent mRNA vaccines are now recommended for everyone aged 6 months and older, and adults aged 65 and older, and those with compromised immune systems may be eligible for an additional bivalent dose. With me today is NFID Medical Director, Dr. William Schaffner, to help us better understand these changes. So, Bill, thanks so much again for joining us.
Oh, always good to be with you, Marla. This will be an interesting little podcast.
So, Bill, first of all, can you explain specifically what has changed and who is affected?
Well, the first thing we know is that the only constant is change. This time, both the FDA and the CDC have made an effort to actually streamline COVID vaccination because it has been rather complicated. Now, the new recommendation focuses on the bivalent booster. We've all heard about that vaccine. It targets both the original viral strain and the Omicron viruses. This bivalent booster now replaces the original shots. Those original shots are no longer available. The only vaccine that will be available from Pfizer and Moderna is the new bivalent booster. Of course, there will be different doses for pediatrics and adults, but the focus will be on getting as many people vaccinated with this bivalent booster. When it comes to adults, the focus has been as follows. We know that even after the bivalent booster, that protection against serious disease, hospitalization, begins to wane after several months. It doesn't go to zero, but it does begin to wane. So, for those people who are in high-risk groups who've already received the bivalent booster, there isn't now an additional recommendation. If you're older, if you're immune compromised, and you've already received the booster, you can receive an additional booster. If you're older, that is over age 65, and 4 months have elapsed since you've received your bivalent booster, you are eligible for receiving another bivalent booster that will carry your protection through the summer. If you're immune compromised, you only have to wait 2 months because your immune system didn't respond optimally to that first bivalent booster, and you are now eligible for another bivalent booster if 2 months have elapsed since you've received your original bivalent booster. And further, in discussion with your physician, as time continues to elapse, if another 2 months have gone by, you could, if you and your physician agree, receive yet another booster, because immune-compromised people respond less well to the vaccine and their protection wanes over time. There are comparable new recommendations for children. It gets more complicated, and ask your provider about that, because the CDC will provide detailed recommendations regarding children. But basically, children also are now receiving the bivalent vaccine exclusively.
Very helpful, Bill. Question is now, how are people who have never received any COVID-19 vaccines affected?
Well, they no longer have the original vaccine available. If they haven't been vaccinated, their vaccination will begin with this new bivalent booster. That makes things much simpler, both for the patient and for the provider.
Indeed, a true simplification. Um, we're all a little bit startled by the overall uptake of COVID-19 vaccines in the US and how it's been underwhelming at best. Do you think that these changes in the recommendations will have any impact on overall COVID-19 vaccination rates?
Well, you ask about overall vaccination rates. I think of the population, Marla, as divided into three groups. The first are the people I've just mentioned, people who are in high-risk groups, older persons, people age 65 and older, particularly those who have underlying serious illnesses, and the folks who are immune compromised. Those people, many of them, have already received the bivalent booster, and many of them are very attentive to the recommendations. And as we speak, they're out there seeking their additional booster dose because more than 4 months have elapsed since they've been vaccinated. That's a sliver of the pie, a slice of the pie. Then there's a large group of folks who are otherwise healthy. They've received some vaccination. Many of them have already had COVID vaccine, and they're putting COVID vaccine and kind of COVID generally behind them. But they will receive, as we will say in a minute, a new recommendation this fall, along with their flu vaccine, and we hope they're attentive to that. The last group, which is a small group, of course, are those who are still skeptical, hesitant, or downright against vaccination, and I think it won't impact them at all.
Sad but true. Bill, looking ahead a bit, and I know you just mentioned this, but both the FDA and CDC advisory committees will be meeting again in June. So should we expect additional changes to the recommendations this fall, or is there any chance of having a combined flu and COVID vaccine by then?
Well, we can expect some changes. The FDA has already telegraphed that. And what we do with our influenza vaccine is updated each year, and then we get our annual flu shot in the fall. We're moving to a similar program with COVID vaccine. The Food and Drug Administration is going to meet with its advisory committee in May and decide which strains should be put in a new vaccine. And we're moving to an annual COVID booster also. This year, unfortunately, we'll still have to get both vaccines. We'll have to roll up both our sleeves to get our flu shot as well as our COVID vaccine. However, the vaccine scientists are working, this is optimistic, to put flu and COVID together. So cross your fingers, maybe by next year, we'll have a combined vaccine and we'll only have to get one of those vaccines.
A true simplification. Stay tuned. Bill, I guess before we sign off, I'll just ask, are there any other final words of wisdom? Your insights are always so helpful to the listeners. So
COVID has not gone away. It's sobering to realize that still today, somewhere between 200 and 300 people die every day of COVID. So this virus has not left our population. It's smoldering along. It's also capable still of mutating into something more serious. So we're all going to have to keep our guard up in order to make sure that we don't have another pandemic-like winter. So I would hope that everyone thinking about this fall is ready to indeed roll up both their sleeves and get their COVID vaccine as well as their annual influenza vaccine to protect our population maximally against both of these serious viral infections.
Good advice as always. Thanks again for your valuable insights, Bill, and thank you all for tuning in to this special episode of the Schaffner Report.